Everyone, and welcome to our webinar this morning, where I'm joined by three esteemed guests to explore the subject of replatforming. What is it? Why would any platform want to do it? And why should I, as an advisor, care? I'm Georgina Smith, and it's my privilege to look after the INN8 distribution and client servicing. And before we get into our session this morning, let's cover a little bit of housekeeping. This session has been submitted for one CPD point. A quick note on CPD. For those of you who watch today's webinar in full, you will receive a CPD certificate automatically via email. For anyone who didn't join us at the start today, or has to drop off early, or you're watching the recording, or perhaps you're watching via someone else's unique registration link, you will need to complete a questionnaire to receive your CPD point. And this questionnaire will follow shortly after today's webinar via email. As always, we're happy to take questions via the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen today, and we'll answer them towards the end of the session. Okay, so that's the T's and C's over. Let's get on to introducing my three guests. Firstly, today, I've got Phil Billingham here representing the advisor in our conversation. Phil is a regular on this webinar. Well, he's actually the only person we've invited back twice. Phil is a well-respected advisor in the industry globally, having helped advisors in the UK, US, Europe, Canada, South Africa, and Australia navigate changes, whether it's regulation, technology, or client value proposition development. He's also an advisor who's been through several replatforming exercises as a user, and he and his colleagues at Perceptive Planning have the battle scars to prove it. He truly is an advisor's advisor. Secondly, representing the platform's perspective today is Mickey Gambale. Mickey, as the CEO of INN8, was integral to the success of building and launching the new digital INN8 platform. He has walked this journey of changing technology firsthand and understands the importance of having a clear vision of how things will be different, both from a technology point of view and from a cultural and experience perspective. And then, of course, following up to advisors and clients with innovative problem solving and delivery on your promises, whilst, and this is the really tricky bit, keeping everyone on the bus. And my third guest today is Peter Mann. Peter joins us wearing the hat of the technology provider today. He's perfectly capable, though, of wearing the platform provider hat as well, having been the CEO of the UK's largest platform. He's now the EMA chairman of Bravura, one of the world's largest platform technology providers. And with his experience, he's able to understand what advisors want, what platforms want, and critically, what the technology will deliver. So Peter, if I may start with you, we conducted a poll recently of advisors and asked them whether they were prepared for the replatforming journey South Africa is currently undergoing. And 36% said they were unsure what replatforming is. So Peter, what is replatforming?
Morning, Georgina and esteemed colleagues, and to those who are listening, thank you very much for tuning in. So what is replatforming? So there is a perception of what it means to many people, but the reality is it's where a party to the chain, normally the platform service operator, decides that there are benefits to be gained from moving from one source supplier of underlying investment and technology architecture to another. And that decision is never taken lightly, because it's an expensive, it's a difficult process, so the perceived benefits have to be quite considerable. And the perceived benefits have to be delivered to all parties to the chain. So to the platform themselves, they will naturally seek a better operating environment, a saving in costs or a significant improvement in efficiency, which makes the costs spread across less assets within the business. For the advisor, most businesses, certainly in the UK, distribute primarily through an intermediated distribution channel. So there has to be a benefit to the advisor moving from A to B. And lastly, of course, there has to be a benefit, both perceived and actual, to the end client, which may often be cost, but quite often will be functionality and efficiency. And it's common, it's happened a lot in the UK, and I am sure it will happen a lot more.
Thanks, Peter. So, Mickey, if I might turn to you as a platform provider, why would you do it? Peter says there in his comments it's quite difficult. Why would you do it?
So George, that's a great question. And, you know, it is difficult. Let's be very honest. It's also very expensive and very painful. But as a platform provider, if you don't do it, you're essentially left behind. You're left in the dark ages. Peter spoke about or mentioned briefly some of the internal benefits, so the benefits to the business who is going through the replatforming. And, you know, if you look at it from a group perspective or from a company perspective, really what you're looking for is to bring efficiencies into your environment and to bring cost savings and economies of scale and economies of scope. So what I mean by economies of scope, the ability to do more to meet more market demand. And those are very important things because that ultimately translates, you know, as Peter said, into benefits for the clients. What happens if you don't do it? Well, quite simply, if you don't do it, as I said, you're left in the dark ages and you're left with a clunky admin system. You're left with a lot of people processing data. That means a lot of mistakes. You're left with very slow turnaround times, so not meeting client demands and expectations. And essentially, you've got a very old-fashioned business. And so the reality is, if you want to continue to meet demands of clients, if you want to continue to meet demands of financial advisors, and if you want to offer real value to them, you have to go through this journey. You have to do it.
So you mentioned there, Mickey, you know, if you don't do it, you're left with an old clunky system. Is that pretty much what South African technology is at the moment? Because, you know, advisors experience the front end, if you like, the web. But that's quite different from the technology that sits behind it. What is the state of that technology in the South African market?
Absolutely, Georgina, they're old clunky systems. In fact, they're not even platform or Lisp systems. You'd probably find that these systems are old, you know, collective investment scheme or Manco client liability systems of some form or another. You may find that these systems are old banking systems or old Lifeco systems. So they're not really fit for purpose. What we've seen a lot of the industry players do is they've, exactly as you've said, masked that and put very good and very capable front-end technology for the consumer. But the truth is that doesn't bring a true client experience. You can have a really good-looking, really sexy front end, but your trading still takes 72 hours. You can have a really good front end, but the ability to do an instant withdrawal doesn't exist, or the ability to go into the market instantly at real time doesn't exist. And this is what the back-end technology does. So it really muscles up the capability and the client experience for the consumer and for the financial advisor. And so what you've seen in South Africa is a very well-developed platform market and industry from a product and capability perspective, but it's not really well developed from an efficiency and a process and administrative perspective. And that ultimately means that our platform industry costs more on average in South Africa than it does in the rest of the world. We have more people to do more work, unfortunately.
And so, Mickey, just staying with you before I move to Phil, in your mind, what is a successful replatform experience?
So that makes me very nervous because I know how very difficult replatforming can be. But a successful experience to me, Georgina, is one where clients feel as little or the least amount of disruption as possible. Once the replatforming is finished, they really have a wonderful experience in terms of new capabilities, new experiences, new ways of work. It's got to be easy. It's got to be efficient. And then from the shareholder perspective, or the company perspective that's made this replatforming, they've got to have a capability and a technology that will stand test of time, so that hopefully they never ever go through this massive replatforming exercise again. You know, I've said before in one or two other discussions that we've had that if your platform business doesn't look like an IT or a technology company, you're going to be in trouble in future. And so what it looks like is like a new IT company, one that can continuously bring new innovation, new developments to market, and one that has the least disruption for clients and gets you the best bang for buck.
Phil, speaking on behalf of the advisor, you know, you've been through replatforming exercises in the UK, and it's happened a lot more in the UK. And I think there's South African advisors watching today who are thinking, well, what is this replatforming thing that everyone's talking about? Should I be worried? In actual fact, in the poll I mentioned at the start of this webinar, 36%, again, the same number, 36% of advisors said they weren't concerned at all about South Africa's replatforming journey. From an advisor's perspective, what do you think about that number of 36%, and what does a successful replatforming exercise look like for you?
Morning all. Yeah, there was a time when I was much younger when I shared that innocence and naivety and belief that we thought that this was just technology, and somebody was going to put a 2-litre engine in a car instead of a 1500 engine in the car, but the rest of the car was the same, and therefore who cares? And we were soon, unfortunately, disabused of that innocent belief. Interested in the comments of Peter and Mickey. The platforms talk about the end users and clients an awful lot. However, when I've asked the question, what percentage of their end user clients actually log on and use the platform on a weekly or monthly basis in any way, I often struggle to get a number of that. So the advisors, we're on the platform morning till night on the variety. In fact, we use about 12 platforms one way or another, and we're probably on 4 of them all day. It's how we run our business. So we know when things are working, when things are not working. We know when the platform goes down. Clients don't. We've had, particularly during these difficult times, clients who we know don't log in from one year to the other. So, and I think there's an awful lot of conversation about making this brilliant for the end client, and I would question sometimes of what problem are you trying to solve when the end client is just trying to get in, log in, see a number, that's what my portfolio is worth, and then log out again. With greatest respect, if we had clients who were into instant trading and really online trading, that would scare the living daylights out of us, and we would try to hive that money off and put them on a trading platform, because we can't manage capital gains tax, income streams, risk, asset allocation. If we've got a client who at 2 in the morning decides it's a really clever idea to go into Japanese companies beginning with Z through some sort of leverage coin mechanism, we're just not going to do that. So if you are truly wanting to work with independent advisors, then it's defining what does good look like. And going back to why advisors should care, independent advisors presumably have done some form of due diligence on the platform that they've chosen to trust with their client assets. And I think what I'm going to say is you're going to do the due diligence again, because if they're changing the running gear of the platform, if you've driven a car and it behaves in a certain way and they say, right, okay, that's a great car, but what we're going to do is change the engine, change the gearbox, change the steering. It's going to go back-wheel drive instead of front-wheel drive. And by the way, the steering wheel is going to go on the left. You might want to do your due diligence again. And look at what that will feel like in terms of how you run your business. We, as a business, had a protocol and processes that aligned with how we worked with platforms, and what we found is we had to change our business processes. We weren't warned about that. We had no advanced knowledge of that. That would have been nice to have some sort of shared vision.
Thanks, Phil. I think that brings us nicely on to perhaps the ways in which a platform can re-platform. And Peter, if I might just switch to you, there's various ways in which a platform can re-platform. Perhaps you could talk us through those two different ways. I believe there's two different ways. You might disagree with me, or might say there's three or four. But what are those different ways in which a technology provider and a platform and an advisor can work together to engage in this re-platforming process?
Okay, I will do. Before I come to that, can I just pick up on 2 points that Phil made? First of all, why are platforms important? I think that's summarized in one of Phil's comments. It's when he said, it's how we run our business, right? So, for when we first built platforms in the UK, and Scandia were among the people who built the first one, then it changed the face of how people thought about investment and the way they ran their investments. So it is now the way that intermediated businesses run their business. So let's not forget, we're talking about the way that advice businesses provide advice to clients, which in our view, my view, long held view, is essential. So they are critically important. And to Phil's point, you realize how critically important they are when they don't work, right? And I always had a phrase when I ran Scandia, what's really important? What's really important is it just works, right? It just works. Okay, so how can you re-platform? I think there are two traditional ways and one emerging way. The traditional way, which the early pioneers, who often get scalped in the UK, decided to do it, was to take a big bang approach, right? Which is to do an awful lot of work from working out what you want, to working with your chosen provider, to building, to testing, so user testing with advisors, internal testing, regression testing, and all that sort of thing, so that you believe that on Tuesday, whatever the date is today, 15th of November, right, you decide that this is the day that you will move from A to B. And that is a massive task, because it doesn't matter how good you are, how much you've rehearsed the show, right? The first night is always the most trepidatious night, and things go wrong, right? There hasn't been a platforming exercise in the UK, right, that hasn't had some issues, and it's perfectly understandable when you understand the scale of the thing, right? That you migrate masses of clients. That is littered with war stories that I'm sure Phil could tell, I could certainly tell, and maybe you will tell in the South African market at some point in time. Okay, so that's one way of doing it. It is, I think, the traditional way of doing it, but it is a less common way of doing it now. The second way that you can do it, which has some significant merit and has been executed by some of the players in the UK, and it's probably fair to say with a greater degree of success, although the comparator is pretty stark, is that you can run, because it's possible to modularize many of the components of a platform, it's perfectly possible to effectively run your existing platform whilst introducing elements of your new platform, such that over a period of time, you transition from one place to another, right? And that has, whilst it might take more time and arguably may be more expensive, because obviously you're running two systems together for a period of time, there is evidence to suggest that it is less painful for both the donor and the recipient, donor in terms of functionality and reputation, recipient but it does require the recipient to understand what is being delivered at what point in time and what is sitting on the old system and the new system. So you have to work more closely with the advisor community if you do that. For most businesses, but there is a third, an emerging way in the UK, and actually in Australia as well, And that is to decide that, so for most businesses of scale, eventually the platform will become the enterprise-wide solution across the products and the services that they provide through either their various distribution channels, various product wrappers, or in some cases, various brands. However, you may decide that if that strategic relationship is what you want, you will work with one of the big providers. In the UK now, it's possible to consider the bifurcated approach where you choose the platform of choice, or you use your existing platform of choice as the core registry system and the system of record, and you build an ecosystem of effectively microservices or plug-in additions to provide you with the service beyond custodianship and transaction that you want. There is merit and demerit in that. The merit in it is that you're not dependent on a single source of the truth. You have a number of people supplying you with that ecosystem. So, you know, if for example, one of your suppliers suffers an enterprise-wide fault or P1 issue, then you're not dependent on them. So that is an advantage. The innate disadvantage, excuse the pun, right? The innate disadvantage is that you have a number of things which could possibly go wrong. But the argument is it's quicker to change things if that's the case. It's quicker to implement new regulatory imperatives or changes if that's the case. So there is a bit of not a burgeoning, but an embryonic microservices culture which emerged out of Australia that's beginning to infiltrate in the UK, and we're seeing some evidence of people purchasing added features and benefits to build their own ecosystem with more than one IT provider. So there you go, George. Long answer, but
no, it's a very full answer.
Two existing and one emerging.
No, absolutely. And I think, Mickey, if I can just swap to you, what are we seeing in the South African market in terms of how platform providers are re-platforming? What does it look like here?
So probably, George, the easiest place to comment on first is in our own backyard. And you would know this quite well. We took a slightly different approach, and we try to look at, I suppose, the best of everything in terms of what we do. And so we haven't gone with this big bang approach. In fact, what we decided to do from a group perspective is build a completely new business and a new capability. There were two reasons for that. The first is it gives us the opportunity, you know, as Peter said in his second example, to be able to transition and to be able to learn while the existing system grows. And so we felt that that would put less risk into the system and less change, you know, early on for clients, and avoid that big bang approach where, you know, it's showtime and you rock up on stage and it's not working properly. And the second big reason why we chose to start it as a new business also was for a cultural change. You must remember that ultimately it's all about human beings that run businesses. And so culture for us was a very, very important aspect in terms of re-platforming or creating a new platform capability. And so we really wanted to look at the culture of what is a business like this? How should it behave? What should the type of individuals be? How can we get, and we've often used this word or this phrase, different smart people into the mix, you know, the non-traditional people, so that we could get thinking that's really out of the box. And so we've done that. A big thing for us was obviously working very closely with advisors through our INN8 Connect sessions so that we could build and learn with them. And yes, that has taken longer, but we think we have a much better quality product as a result. If we look at some of the other platforming or re-platforming that's about to happen in South Africa, there's two large competitors or large players in the market that are re-platforming. We know that they're re-platforming from an end-to-end service, so essentially outsourcing the whole capability and building from scratch. And my understanding is for both of those that they wish to go with the big bang approach. You know, that makes us very nervous. What traditionally happens when you do that? What I've seen at least happen globally is you stop investing in your legacy system, so to speak. And so, you know, you start seeing leaks in the boat. and things get a bit rocky. And if a storm does arrive, you're not as well prepared. And you see a massive focus internally, and people being focused internally to build the new system. Interestingly, also, is I'm quite keen to see how that culturally affects those businesses. We haven't seen it play out yet, but that would be something I'd be watching quite keenly. You know, for us, I said it was important to change the culture. You've got a business with a certain culture. You've got a business where you've built your systems in-house, for example. You know the code, you know the IT, you have large IT teams, and now all of a sudden you're going an outsourced model. How do those people cope? You know, you're going from building your own stuff to being an outsource expert. How do you teach that skill? And so what does that mean to the business? And so there's a lot of change that needs to come through. And then maybe just touching a little bit on Peter's last point about microservices and what we do there. I think we sort of slowly started to go down a route like that. At INN8, we've got currently 17 different integrations in terms of software. And hopefully, if something doesn't work, we will be able to unplug it and replug something back in. But we haven't tested it yet, let me be honest, but that's the idea. And so I think we've tried to look, George, across all three aspects and get that right. And you know, other people have paid school fees. Why should we be big-headed and also pay those school fees and think we're better? Let's go learn from their wins, and let's also go learn from their mistakes. And that's the approach that we've taken.
And just staying with you, Mickey, how, obviously we worked with Bravura, and how complex has it been to take some of this technology and South Africanize it?
I smile because it's a nervous smile. It's been extremely complex, to be honest. You know, while I think at a very high level, a lot of the fundamentals in terms of what we do and the products that different jurisdictions offer are similar and try to achieve the same goals and outcomes ultimately for clients. The localized regulatory nuances are quite unique. South Africa, in fact, has a very sophisticated and a very unique financial services system, and a well-regulated system with very robust regulation and compliance behind the product capabilities that we have. And so one should never underestimate the regionalization of overseas technology for a local provider. You know, often providers will tell you that what they've got works and, you know, one size fits all. Luckily with us in Bravura, we spent a lot of time around regionalization. The guys helped us a lot. You know, they've done this before in many jurisdictions in many regions, and we leveraged that knowledge from them to be able to regionalize specifically from South Africa. But it's extremely complex, George, and extremely difficult, and it takes a lot of time and shouldn't be underestimated. It's probably the thing that took us the longest, to be honest. Building a front-end engagement, a client journey, a UX, a CX, those things are not that difficult to do. We know what works and we know what doesn't work. Regionalizing a piece of technology, that's a little bit more work, to be honest.
Yeah, and when we talk about regionalizing, let's just make that real. Let's just talk about an example. You know, nowhere else in the world is there an endowment like this, and the endowment works in South Africa. Same with the living annuity. You know, with those rules that we've got in place from the regulator, you know, that has to be built into the technology. Coming down the line is two-pot regulation. You know, that, again, being able to flex and work with your technology to be able to adapt to that regulation is absolutely key. So when we talk about regionalization, that's the real example of what we mean when we talk about regionalization. Phil, if I may.
Georgia, just to comment from the Bravura perspective, if I may for a moment. I think you're absolutely right, because what we find, and what I find when I come to South Africa, is a lot of people quite rightly draw significant parallels between the South African regulatory environment and that in the UK. We talk frequently about retail distribution review and things like that. That's one element of regionalization. But as Mickey says, the principal element of regionalization is not the legislative imperatives that are provided that are similar. It's how the geography interprets those imperatives to build product wrappers which are most suited to the community that they're seeking to serve. And that's where South Africa and any geography is very different. I mean, living annuities and endowments in the way that they're structured in South Africa simply wouldn't be appealing to a UK-based product wrapper provider, whereas they are clearly very appealing to the South African market. So it's important to understand what regionalisation is. It's principally product regionalisation rather than legislative regionalisation.
You're absolutely right. Thanks, Peter. Phil, go back to Peter's 2 ways, the big bang or the bringing up a new platform versus and keeping the old one going until we're ready to move assets over. You've been through both those journeys. How did that work for you?
The big bang didn't. For us, that was an extraordinarily painful process, and we really learned a lot of lessons about how not to do in that. It was a series of almost a series of bangs, and what we found ourselves in a position was on the Monday morning after a weekend of offline and then online, the client were trying to do things that didn't work. The log on was different, this was different, that was different, and all that was happening, we were fielding calls and emails. We couldn't particularly help the clients because we had not been communicated with what those changes were and how to deal with them. We were asking for things like dummy accounts and stuff like that. So we had to refer the clients to the provider. That swamped the provider because they didn't have enough staff to cope. And what that led to was a fall in trust by the clients. We had to take our branding off the platform. We had our branding on the platform. We took that off because we felt it was corroding our branding, degrading our branding. And of course, it just led to more and more clients every Monday morning checking the platform, because it was making them more and more nervous because where was their money? You know, their money was out in the ether. So it was corroding the trust based on the not so much the lack of functionality, but the different functionality. And I think one of the scary things we found when we got more and more engaged with the platform concerned, and we ended up doing some consultancy work with them. And so we bought a great big teddy bear, 1.5 meters tall, and then dressed it up as a client and said, right, this is Anne. Let me tell you about Anne. And we sat in with team meetings, went down to Bath and team meetings. And we sat the teddy bear in the chair, dressed up Anne, and talked about Anne, about who Anne was. Anne's a widow. Money's come through. She inherited it. Her son helps her log in. This is who it is. So can you explain to us how you've designed the changes in the functionality to help Anne? What have you done that's helping Anne? And sadly, there was an awful lot of amusement, but an awful lot of disconnect. A lot of the functionality was designed for techie people by techie people, and young people who've got good eyesight. They've been using technology since they were in the crib, and it was just natural for them. But those people haven't got any money, so they don't matter. The people with the money look a bit more like Peter and myself. We're using glasses, and those people really, really matter. I was brought up on feature, advantage, benefit. A feature is what something does. And the advantage is what that means, and benefit is what it means to you. And I could get lots of features and be told lots of things. It's like walking into a computer shop on a Saturday morning. You get the spotty 16-year-old telling you all about what how many grams of this and whatever. And the answer is, so what? Why do I care? Why is that at all interesting? But for the techie people, that's really, really interesting. For our clients, it's really, 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 really boring, and they just want to get in and see what's there. And I think that lack of end client focus was a result of a real groupthink and internal thinking and techie people just talking to techie people, and that's made me very, very nervous. They failed to share the vision with us, failed to share what the client experience could be. I found when we went down to Bath, there was a great big project plastered all over the walls. None of that had been shared with us. You talk about advisor focus groups. At no point was an advisor firm sat in on that and saying, this is how we use the platform. This is our business process. When we take on a client, this is our process because it fits with you. Now, you're telling us we're going to have to change that. We're going to have to change some of the roles of our staff. We're going to have to retrain our staff. None of that was communicated. That was a tremendous cost to the business. And I think there was almost an unspoken arrogance that this was a tech problem, whereas actually it was a business problem. And they were using technology to solve an internal problem, the stuff Peter talked about internally about cost, migrating to new stuff. All of that is great. I don't care really, if I'm honest, as a business owner. I'm really not interested. What I'm interested in is how do we use the platform to look after clients, many of whom are vulnerable in one way, shape or form, many of whom trust us with their whole financial worth, and anything that makes people less trusting of us and financial services, given the environment we all find ourselves in, is bad. So Big Bang was bad. There's just no. Peter was being nice about it. I don't have to be nice. It wasn't mixed. It was just bad. The other experience we had was much more measured, and it was a platform wasn't our primary platform. And basically, it was new Coke and old Coke sort of thing. They just had a new platform, and we told about it, and we were quite cautious about it. And eventually, it was literally they called the old platform the classic platform, and the new platform was the new platform. And eventually, we migrated, and we could migrate clients on a case by case basis, and the functionality works, and they're a good firm. It's I shouldn't say who it is, but it was AJ Bell, and it's not an accident that firm has a culture, that word again, that is much closer to the advisor community, is much more engaged with the advisor community than the platform that was using the Big Bang approach. So, speaking to the advisors out there, if you've partnered with a platform and you've built your business processes around the processes of the platform, and you might not know you have, but you absolutely have, then you really need to be mapping those and asking the platform very firmly, very clearly, how is this business process going to have to change? How am I going to have to train my staff? How are they going to answer these client questions when you go through this process? Because there are real business implications there that were not thought through in many cases in the UK.
I think that's tremendous advice. No, I think that's tremendous advice, and I think what I'm hearing is an overwhelming advice from you, Phil, the advisor's advisor, saying don't be a passenger in this.
No,
either partner with someone who is doing it the AJ Bell route. I'm going to plug now because that's what INN8 is doing, or has done even. So partner with someone like that, or if you're stuck on doing the Big Bang thing, make sure you start engaging early to change the processes in your business to be able to cope with the Big Bang when it comes.
Yeah.
Peter, you've been through many replatforms with many different replatforming, many different platforms out there. Would you concur with what Phil says? What other advice would you give to advisors who are the recipient or in partnership with a platform that's replatforming?
Yeah, I think one of the most disappointing things that Phil said, but is absolutely true, is the degree to which those who are considering replatforming talk to the people who are the principally affected by the outcome of what they've decided to do. And so, advisor fora and advisor roadshows during the course of a replatforming exercise are really, you would think they would be intuitively sensible things to do. You would be amazed at the degree to which they don't happen. Or maybe you wouldn't after what Phil said and what I've just endorsed. But if it is going to be a big bang, and if that is the chosen approach by both the platform service operator and the underlying architecture supplier, there is so much that can be done before that big bang to include, to listen to allow to participate, to help to understand the advisor community if you operate in an intermediated distribution channel, so that the big bang doesn't become such a big bang. Right? It's still, from an IT perspective, hugely difficult, right? But you can prepare people and you can help prepare people. Right? And so few businesses in the UK, and actually I suspect very few in South Africa, well, I know very few in South Africa, actually take the advisors with them on the journey, actually prepare the advisors and say, okay, that process, to Phil's point, that process that you used to do this way will now look like that. And it's not just the advisors, actually, because advisors, if you ask an advisor what they enjoy most, right, they enjoy most sitting in front of clients. It's actually often the power planners, the people in the back office, who prepare the platform processes in order for the advisors to be able to use them. So it's not just educating advisors, because quite often they aren't your end user. It's about—
Can I just say to that,
yeah.
Sorry, Peter, can I just emphasize that point, that I'm on most platforms, I'm ready to sit down that I have certain clients and I get correspondence and email. Let's put it bluntly, I'm not allowed to go on the platforms of our business. That's way above my pay grade. That's what we have a team for. And so little attention, particularly financial planning, is a team sport, and the advisors are seen as the focus of this, and they're invited to the road shows and nice lunch and all the rest of it. And that's complete nonsense. There's no point in inviting me to a roadshow and showing me some PowerPoint about some vaporware that may or may not exist. It's absolutely about training and working with the team who have to suffer these, because they have to take the calls. They're the ones who can't do their job on a Monday morning when it doesn't work. It's absolutely, so to Peter's point, it's understanding that the advice is delivered by a business, not by just an advisor swanning around having lunches. Sorry, Pete, to interrupt, but that's such an important point.
No. I think, well, thank you for the endorsement, because it is something that so few platform service operators, if they do understand it, they don't do anything about it. So my assumption is they don't understand it. So it would be tremendously helpful if they did that. So Big Bang could possibly be more efficient than it is currently, but it involved a different approach, which I don't see much evidence of.
Very interesting, Phil and Peter, and I think you've got a whole fan club coming your way, Phil, as the advisor's advisor. When I look at all the hearts and thumbs up that are coming your way, certainly from experience, it is absolutely the assistants and the power planners that we enjoy engaging with most over this. Mickey, listening to Phil and Peter, what has INN8 done to really address some of the concerns, some of the experiences that they've given us from various other markets around the world?
So, George, I think the first thing which we did, which was fundamentally different in the South African market, is we built this platform with the advisor in the room through our INN8 Connect sessions. And that was very important. When I say advisor, I mean everyone in his office. Recently you were telling me about some of the work you were doing with the back office people of a financial advice firm, and how you guys were having a little bit of competition between doing it the INN8 way and the old way, and showing some of the efficiencies out there. But I think that was the most important thing for us, is bring the advisor in the room, because when we built INN8, it's an advisor first platform, and we specifically designed it like that. The other thing that we looked at was, as I mentioned earlier, the new thinking, the new culture, rather than just re-platforming and ending up with a Lisp 2.0, so to speak. So we're not trying to facelift this current car model. We fundamentally want to change the game. And I believe we've brought some of that fundamental change about. For example, in your space, George, the high-touch distribution model, in the INN8 environment, the operational support to the service teams doesn't sit in the back office. It sits in the distribution team, in the front. So there's no throwing of the hot potato, so to speak, over the fence when things go wrong. And let's be honest, things do go wrong. I'm never going to say that they don't, but it's how you react and how quick you are to address things when they go wrong, and how you keep clients informed when things go wrong. And that's been a real game changer for us. The other advantage we had was, by going sort of the second route in this transition, we had the ability to test and learn. And so, yes, we haven't built all the functionality yet that we need, but that's a test and learn approach. And the test and learn approach really brings some soundness and robustness to the business and the capability that we've put out there, so that, what do they say, fools rush in, kind of thing. We don't want to do that. We want to be measured in our approach, and so that we can truly understand when we do something. And let's be honest, even if we have the advisor in the room, sometimes we may end up designing, not on purpose, but something in the incorrect way. And so that test and learn approach gives us the ability to redress that and to correct that. Clearly, one of these days, we're also going to want to do a migration from a replatforming perspective. And so, working again closely with advisors, setting up migration squads, these are things that are sacrosanct to us. And again, we're talking about this regularly within the business and what's needed. And how do we create that flexible comm strategy? How do we keep the advisor informed? And how do we really assist them when the time comes for something like a migration or using something new? Communication. You cannot over communicate. Some people might think you're sawing sawdust when you're communicating all the time, but the truth is, we talk about this stuff every day internally. The advisor out there doesn't. And so when you're saying it for the 59th time, it's actually only being heard for the first time out in the market. I think that's the big mistake businesses often make. We've said it 59 times, and so we think everybody knows, but they don't know. We haven't said it that many times out in the market. So communication is a big and important strategy for us.
Yeah, thanks, Mickey. I think that's so true. And the amount of those support structures that sit in distribution is absolutely key. You've talked about the CAM model, but also the migration squads we're talking about, having them sit in distribution is because we're closest to the advisor, right? We talk to them all the time. We know what they want, and of course the power planners and the advisors. So for me, having not just having a service who are concerned with service, making sure the service is delivered as it should be at a better level than ever before, but actually having someone a completely different team, getting an advisor ready for migration, making sure that their client book is up to speed and has all the what we call data remediation through it that it needs, and keeping that advisor office informed is actually really important as well.
Yeah. I mean, George, I've mentioned this many times, and again back at the office, is if you touch something that has a name on it, in my opinion, you sit in the front of the business. If you touch something that has a number on it, then you can sit in the back of the business. And so often we see companies make mistakes. Staff are touching things with names on. That means you're engaging or talking to a person, and they put those people in the back of the business where they don't have an appreciation of what actually happens in the front, and the difficulties of doing business on a day-to-day basis, and the intricacies of different financial advisors' offices. And so that's why we've made that change in INN8.
Phil, I think it was in our last webinar, you said a wonderful phrase: "We're in the business of people, not money." And I think through this kind of exercise, it emphasizes even more how you're in the business of people, not money. People, because a platform deals with the people in an advisor firm, but also the people within the platform business. How is this going to affect them? How is this going to affect their culture? How is this going to affect their mindset as they go through that replatforming journey? Phil, if I may just move to you. We've got some lovely questions coming in.
Okay.
One of them is, what are the key questions an advisor should be asking of their platform provider who is going through this? And the question really was, what's the key takeaway? And I think this is one of the key takeaways. What's the key questions as an advisor you should be asking a platform provider who's going through a replatforming exercise?
I think there's two parts to how platforms work in terms of how advisors and clients. The first part should be hygiene factors. It should be the ability to be safe custodians and to process money on and money off and income payments and things of that nature. So none of that should change, and that should just work. So the focus then in functionality is on the other stuff, and the other stuff tends to be around reporting, ability to see time value of money, reporting, CGT reporting, book costs, things of that nature. So the question is, what's going to change in that space? We lost for a long time an awful lot of our book costs, because none of the techie people, because they haven't got any money, none of the techie people understood that when you're doing CGT work, you need to have accurate record of book costing. And that all just disappeared and had to be, it took us a year to reconstruct that. That was a huge strain on the business. Nobody told us that was going to happen because they didn't think it was important, because it's not part of their world. So that functionality, as an advisor, you say, well, what am I using the platform for? What of this is going to change? From a client point of view, they don't really care about that, because we just do the CGT, and they don't care if we do it on Abacus or off a spreadsheet. They're really not interested. What they care about is the ability to log on. If the log on page is different, that worries them. So my question is, why is it different? Why are you changing the log on page? Why are you bothering clients? Why are you stressing clients out? So keep as much of it as possible, so that when Big Bang happens on Monday, the client logs in and nothing's changed in their view. Nothing's changed. The car's still blue. So, why are you changing this stuff? And if you're going to change stuff, give advisors dummy accounts so we can look at what the change is, because we can look at it at 8 o'clock before client looks at it at 9 o'clock and rings us and say, we can't log in, we've lost this, we've lost that. So it's really, from an advisor point of view, what's going to change in terms of the functionality of the service you deliver to clients, because we're going to assume that the regulatory stuff is done, the custodianship is done, the settlements, all of that is done. It's just going to happen. It's the stuff that impacts on our relationship with our clients that really matters. How is that changing? And then how is the client stuff? And I would really I wish I'd been asking, and we didn't ask, I wish I'd been asking much more detail about, can you show us what clients are really looking at? You've got all the records of what clients are really logging in and looking at. So when the clients go into the platform themselves, what do they see? What pages are they spending time on? And how is that journey for them going to be different? Because they're not going to do the real-time trading stuff. They're not going to do all the sexy, wonderful stuff. They're just not going to do that. So what are they going to do? How many of them, and when? And we need to understand that. So it's asking those questions. If you have to change your business process, you have to change your business process. I'm not opposed to that, but I'd like to have a bit more than 20 minutes notice to do that, because that just stresses stuff out.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Peter, have you got anything to add as to what advisors should be asking their platform providers who are going through a migration?
Yeah, I think that, Phil's very much quite rightly as an advisor focused on the practical, because he is the recipient of the practical decisions. I think I'd take it to another part of the decision-making chain. I think if I was an advisor, I'd ask my platform service operator, are you doing this for me or are you doing it for your shareholders? Because if you're doing it for the shareholders, then history says the result is suboptimal for me, right? The advisor. So the motivation for doing it, I think, has to be balanced. And where people are successful, I mean, Phil used the example of Andy Bell's business. They were successful not only because of the approach that they took, but because of the culture within their business, which is advisor-centric. And there are advisor-centric platform service operators, and there are those that aren't. The more successful in transition, not surprisingly, are the people who consider all of the parties who are affected or afflicted.
Very, very good point there. I think people do underestimate the importance of culture. A culture match between the advisor and the platform provider. So Albertus, I hope that answers your question. If I may just move to a couple of others. Alan, thanks for joining us, Alan. Great to see you. Alan's, this is one for you, Mickey. Alan's asking how we prioritize certain features, integrations, for example, particularly perhaps with third-party systems, FNA tools, those kind of things. How do we prioritize what we build in what order?
So George, that's a great question. I like to use an analogy of building a house. Now, probably the most boring part of the house is building the foundation. But we know that a house built on a poor foundation is going to end up having cracks. It's going to shift. It's ultimately going to give you headaches and give you headaches for a very, very long time. And it's going to be very, very difficult to fix because once you've put up the walls and you put in the windows and you've put on the roof, to get back into that foundation is no easy task. And building a platform is very similar. And so we took the approach at INN8 of building an extremely solid foundation, a foundation that can, take multi-stories ultimately at a future date. And so that has meant there has been certain functionality that we have held back on until we felt that the foundation was solid enough to be able to bring that in. And something like that, bringing in the provision of daily values into financial planning software, something that we're busy with right now. So absolutely, we didn't do that in our early days. And that was because in our early days, we needed to make sure we met those hygiene factors, that money in, move money around, money out capability, keeping accurate records, making sure the trades happen, making sure the foundation is solid. But the real sparkle, the real sizzle now comes in the fact that we've got this solid foundation and we can do something with it. And so integrations into financial planning software are key on our radar, and absolutely something we'd love to do. In fact, we'd like to ultimately one day not only pass information, but also receive information. That in itself has its own security risks and measures, but those are things that we need to solve. That's why we're here. Those shouldn't be concerns for the end consumers. Those should be our concerns, and we should chisel away at them behind closed doors and come and meet those needs. And I think, as you start to see more and more functionality come out, as you start to see more versions of our software come out, and I always use the Apple iOS analogy, it's version 13 and 13.1, 13.2, 13.3, and then we have a big change in version 14. As you see those come out, they should hopefully be seamless, and you shouldn't experience any major changes, and there should just be enhancements, and you'll see the capability grow more and more.
Thanks, Mickey. I think that's certainly how I've experienced it. And if I can just add as well, what I love about having the new technology, and I believe we've got 11 squads working across various features that are being delivered. What you see is a drop of feature, which ultimately brings benefit to the advisor. And there's always multiple features being dropped, and some of them the advisor sees, some of them are invisible but important. But we see that happen every month, whereas in the old systems, we used to see it once every quarter, sometimes once every 6 months. So you're actually seeing this pace of change coming through much quicker.
Sorry,
yeah, go on.
Yeah, sorry, just to add to that, I use the analogy, 13.1, 13.2, and then you pop over to 14. Something that we've partnered, obviously working with the likes of Bravura, is they do development globally. And we have this concept of return to trunk, which we're about to embark on. So what does return to trunk mean? It's quite simple. If you picture in your mind's eye a tree. You have the trunk, that's the main solid piece of wood. And off you go down a branch and you do your own development in your own code. But sooner or later, you come back to the trunk, back to the center. When we do that, we pick up massive benefits and capability through our partnership with Bravura and the developments and capability that they're doing for other providers. So not only do you go, 13.1, 13.2, 13.3, but you probably skip 14 and 15 and hopefully get to 16. And so it's a real game changer for us to have that ability to return to trunk and bring that additional feature to market, or those features to market.
Yeah, and really leverage off what Bravura is doing globally in all the other markets. There's some really exciting stuff coming through there, especially on the microservices part that Peter alluded to earlier. There are other questions which I'm afraid we haven't got to. A lot of them are statements though, and there's just one statement I'm going to close with. And thank you very much, Andrew, Ben, Sven, Liana, a whole load of people who've put questions through. But the one point I want to end with is from Ben. He says, please send this recording to everyone, platform providers, that is, that may be busy with this painful exercise. I think that really says it all for me to be able to say thank you very much for a really, really useful and entertaining and insightful conversation to Phil, to Peter, and to Mickey. I'm so pleased we're through this journey. We're out in the market, getting assets on our platform. I'm delighted. I'm not sure I'd want to do it again, but I'm very pleased to be at the other side. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me today.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
See you guys. Take care. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
INN8 is a registered trademark of Stanlib Wealth Management Pty Limited, an authorised financial services provider.